Alright, guys. I hope that you enjoyed Mrs. Teal's Greek presentation and Mrs. Horn's Egyptian presentation, and I certainly hope you enjoyed my Hebrew presentation that we started with. Now we're going to go into Rome. I'll be your instructor and podcastee, Mr. Becker, just as I was in the Hebrew podcast. And I just want you guys to keep in mind what you have learned in the other three civilizations. For this, the Roman civilization. The Roman civilization. Today, this is how Rome looks. It's just a shell of a great, great empire. The religion and culture of Rome was based on Greek Catholicism and their pantheon. It's a polytheistic religion. The Roman god Jupiter, for example, was the main god in Roman pantheon, just as Zeus was in the Greek pantheon. Roman origins. The twin brothers you see next to you on this slide, next to the slide, was named Romulus and Remus. These two brothers would start the Etruscan society, which would eventually become Rome. They were orphaned brothers, and they were picked up by a mother wolf, as the tale goes and the legend goes of Rome. The Etruscans would be born from Romulus and Remus, was a tribe in the Italian peninsula of many tribes. They would engulf and swallow each tribe slowly over time, and which would become Rome. The Etruscan kings came about once the Etruscans formed a government. Rome was a monarchy before it became a senate. The thing that pushed the civilization over to become a senate was that the last Etruscan king, known as Tarquin the Proud, who was a greedy monarch to begin with, his youngest son Sextus would fall lustily in love with Lucretia, a married woman, and when he didn't get what he would want, he would rape her. And this would push the civilians and the Senate, or the Syntax at the time, over the edge. And they revolted, which would bring the Roman Senate. SPQR, Senatus Publius que Romanus. The Senate, the Roman Senate, and the people. 509 B.C.E. After the Etruscan kings, Rome did become a senate, and a republican senate, which is kind of how the United States today coordinates their government, by representatives, not 100% democracy, ruled and voted by the people. The Senate would be divided into two classes: patricians, which were the higher class, and plebeians, which were the lower class senators. Over time, they would be seen as equals. In the picture in the slide, you see two men sitting on a chair. These two men are known as consuls, and when the Senate was first around and birthed to the Roman public, these are the highest seats of power in Rome. Roman expansion in the 3rd century BCE rather. Once Rome got control of the Italian peninsula, other civilizations would take notice. One in particular, named Carthage, neighboring in North Africa, would want to take the island between the Italian peninsula and North Africa named Sicily. They would eventually lose this battle to Rome. Once Rome beat Carthage in the first battle, the First Punic War, Carthage looked to Spain to take over and put a foothold into Europe. The Second Punic War would then take hold between General Hannibal of Carthage and General Scipio of Rome. Rome almost lost this battle, this Second Punic War. General Hannibal was a great general and pushed the Roman forces all the way back up to the Italian Alps and almost took over Rome from the Italian Alps. But he began to lose men and supplies from his journey from Spain to the Italian Alps, and thus he was recalled back to Carthage, losing the war for the Carthaginians. The Third Punic War was a fight that Rome picked with Carthage to end them once and for all. This war was a one-sided war from all the riches that Rome had gathered from before the other two Punic Wars. They took over Carthage and burnt it to the ground and took the Carthaginians into slavery. As you see above you in the map above in the slide, this is the territory that Rome would have taken after all three Punic Wars. All the way from Asia Minor, Macedonia, to Spain, and parts of northern Africa that led into Egypt. The Gracchus brothers. The Gracchus brothers were revolutionary in their ideas for the Senate. They pushed for land reform and grain subsidization. But the Roman Senate at the time was very conservative and didn't want to have any of this. And they saw these two brothers as radicals. Thus, they murdered them each for the radical plebeian ideals. In mid-1st century B.C.E., the rise of higher powers in the Senate and consulates had begun with Consul Pompey. That was a general that took over Jerusalem and the Israelites. Another general that took over Gaul in northwestern Rome, today France and Germany, would challenge Pompey for his power seat in Rome. They would fight against each other in the Battle of Pharsalus in the Greek peninsula. Once the tides turned for Pompey, he realized that he had lost the battle and fled to Egypt, where the Egyptian king cut his head off and presented it to Gaius Julius. That Egyptian king's sister was Cleopatra, which Gaius Julius had relations with and produced a child. Gaius Julius, once he took his power seat in Rome, he became a higher power than a consul. He became Caesar. He was beloved by the people, but not the Senate. The Senate felt as if he was taking the power of the people by making him a higher power than any other king or than any other power before. Thus, the Senate brutally murdered Caesar, each senator would stab him once or multiple times with a sword, as you see in the painting below. After this event occurred, the people were not so happy with this, since they loved Julius Caesar so much. So the Senate decided to keep the bloodline with Julius Caesar's nephew, Octavian, at this Roman seat. The Second Triumvirate lasted 10 years. She had Octavian in the Roman seat, Mark Antony in Egypt and parts of Africa, and Lepidus in the eastern part, or Macedonia and Greece, were of Rome. Mark Antony and Cleopatra would challenge Octavian for the Roman power seat. Cleopatra would give him Egyptian troops to fight Octavian's Roman military, but they were destroyed. Mark Antony's Egyptian force was destroyed at the Battle of Actium. The loss was so heavy on Mark Antony and Cleopatra's hearts, they could not face anyone after the battle, so they decided to kill themselves together, leaving a power vacuum for Octavian to take for himself. The Roman Principate begins. Augustus Octavian. Augustus is a title like no other in the Roman Empire. It's the highest of the high. It's godly. It's a deity, majestic. Augustus Octavian would be beloved by the people, providing civil services such as firefighters and police. After the downfall, or not the downfall so much, after the death of Augustus Octavian would be the rule of the tyrants, such as Caligula, for the next couple of years. The Flavian dynasty brought an end to the rule of the tyrants. The last tyrant, Nero, was brought to his knees by Emperor Vespasian of the Flavian dynasty. The Flavian dynasty brought the Colosseum, and Emperor Vespasian and his sons would build over 20-30 years to bring entertainment and glory to the Roman Empire. The Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. The Pax Romana was also known as the rule of the five great emperors, or great rulers, from Emperor Nerva, and then all the way to Emperor Marcus Aurelius. These emperors brought the highest glory and gained a lot of territory for the Roman Empire. This Pax Romana would end with Marcus Aurelius giving the succession to his son for the first time as a hereditary succession in over 200 years. After Marcus Aurelius' son Commodus, after his death, 24 military emperors would then occur, killing each other off and worrying about their power seat and not so much the state of the empire. Then Emperor Diocletian came along and wanted to reform Rome back to its former glory. Emperor Diocletian would ban, or not so much ban, but separate military powers and political powers, so the 24 emperors situation wouldn't happen again. He also split the Roman Empire into two halves. The western half where Rome, the Roman capital, would be, and the eastern half where the new Nicodemia capital would be. He decided that the eastern half was more prosperous, therefore he seated himself there, giving him the better seat out of the two halves. By moving the focus from the west to the east, slowly over time, the Roman capital would decay. Constantine and the rise of Christianity. Emperor Constantine would make the Roman Catholic Church the official religion of the Roman Empire. He'd be the first emperor to embrace Christianity and bring the end of the persecution of the Christians. He would become a saint, pope, and leader of the new eastern city, Constantinople. If it wasn't for Constantine, Christianity would not be the religion it is today. It would not have spread as it has today, with all its different sects, and denominations. The fall of Rome. 100 years after Diocletian's split of the empire from east to west, the Roman, or the western side, would become very weak and dependable on the eastern side. Germanic barbarians would see this and take advantage of the weak city of Rome. One in particular, Odoacer, would see it, and he would take the Roman city from the last true Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustus. Once Rome became in control of the Germans, the Byzantine Empire, or the western half of the old Roman Empire, would prosper. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the Roman part of our podcast. We will be doing a test on the Roman part. I want you to be able to correlate the Greek cultures and how they influenced the religion and the culture of early Rome, and I also want you to examine how the Hebrew culture turned the Romans to Christianity. That'll be it. Alright, thanks guys.